Want to win money on sports? With Underdog, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash just by picking higher or lower on your favorite players' stats. Millions of fans have won billions of dollars on Underdog. Will you be next? Download the Underdog app and sign up to get a free pick with your first cash entry up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama, Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369.
Welcome in to It's Always Sunny in Chiefs Kingdom. I'm Austin. Find me on Twitter at RealBirdLawyer. Here with me, as always, my co-host, Taylor at Taylor_Witt on Twitter.com. That's what we call it. What's going on?
Oh, nothing at all. Just a regular Wednesday day for us. Really excited to talk about the undefeated Kansas City Chiefs, the coolest thing that's going on in my life, your life, and anybody else's life.
It is amazing to just talk about the undefeated Chiefs in a completely normal week, and we are brought to you, as always, by Fansided. We got a great episode for you guys today. We've got, of course, news. We're going to take a little spin into the world of what is happening. We are going to recap the Chiefs' thrilling 30-24 victory over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Monday Night Football in overtime, and we are going to preview Broncos week. Denver Broncos are coming to Kansas City to take on our Chiefs. But first, the Wednesday injury report is out. 2 players did not practice. Tershawn Wharton has a knee injury. Juju Smith-Schuster still not practicing with that hamstring injury. I mean, he's an injury-prone, late 20s wide receiver. And apparently, obviously when he went into the Niners game, he was questionable with the hamstring injury going into that game, and he made it worse. So he's still not practicing. Tershawn Wharton, don't know how serious that's going to be. But then the other names on the injury report, a lot of big names: Kareem Hunt, George Karlaftis, and Mecole Hardman, all limited participants on Wednesday. And then 4 players listed on the injury report who are full participants: Mike Dana, Najee Johnson, Derek Nottie, and Patrick Mahomes, listed with the ankle injury, and he's a full go. So that's good news.
That is good news. And in fact, I think the best news on this injury report is Mike Dana, a guy that, is an impact player on the defensive line and has been out. I believe he maybe played week 1. I'd have to go look, but certainly been out almost the entire year. And, that defense is they're getting some guys. We've got Amenahu on the mend, and Coach Reed said that he'd be coming close. I mean, it's fun. It's good to have some guys actually coming back from injury as opposed to being added to the injury report.
Yeah, absolutely. He actually played the first 4 games, but we have not seen him since. We've not seen him since work. We have not seen him since New Orleans. So he actually played the first 3. Then he got hurt. Then he came back just for the New Orleans game. Anyway,
oh yeah, that's right. They tried to.
You also have to
back,
put in Michael Dana in Pro Football Reference to look up Mike Dana. That's a little bit interesting, a little bit fun. Michael Dana. Long-term injury update from friend of the show, Dan Harms. Jalen Watson seems to think that he's going to be able to play again this year, or this season, I should say. Maybe not in the calendar year 2024, but friend of the show, Dan Harms, replied to somebody on Twitter that Watson was out for the year, and Jalen Watson himself replied, "Who said that?" He has since deleted that tweet, and who knows what his motivations might be for doing that. But hopefully that's a good sign.
Hopefully it is. I do think that it would be such an interesting case if you're a NFL player for other people on the internet to be talking about your own health and situation. And I mean, I'm sure these guys look their names up. I'm sure, especially, so he saw somebody talking about him and they said he's out for the year, and he's going, oh, let me make the decision if I'm out for the year, not you randos. And, that's interesting. It's certainly better than him maybe retweeting it with a sad face or something, or
Right,
being,
right.
admitting that he is going to be out for the year. So yeah, Jalen Watson certainly a big part of the early defense success this year, and hopefully, all they need all these guys for are those three
Sure.
games at the end of the year
That's
that matter.
it. That's all it is. We just need to get everybody healthy at the right time. The Chiefs did not add other item of news, the trade deadline. Big national news, huge implications for the future of this country, January and beyond. The NFL trade deadline, of course, was yesterday. The Chiefs do not make another move. They obviously added Joshua Uche. They add DeAndre Hopkins. Oh boy, did they. But they did not make another move at the trade deadline. They were reportedly interested in Saints cornerback Marshawn Lattimore, who, of course, was selected one pick after Patrick Mahomes in the 2017 draft, an all-pro, and obviously a guy who's at 28 is still playing at a high level. But the Washington Commanders swooped in with an absolute haul. Third-round pick, fourth-round pick, sixth-round pick to get back Lattimore and a fifth-rounder. So they were able to swoop him up, and the Chiefs stand pat at trade deadline.
I think most Chiefs fans were really into the idea of adding someone, especially a cornerback, and especially a guy with some name value in Marshawn Lattimore, until they saw the price. And then you see that price of a third, a fourth, and then a sixth for a fifth, and it just it just wouldn't have really made a lot of sense. I think the Chiefs, especially being as solid as they are across the board on defense, sure, cornerback could use a little bit of help, but what team doesn't have one or two positions where they could upgrade if they had to, but like the Chiefs weren't desperate. They were looking for value, just like they were. I mean, hell, you compare that trade to the Hopkins trade, which
Right.
is now hilarious in hindsight. But I mean,
Yeah,
a
it
fifth that
is.
becomes a fourth for Hopkins when that was
When we
basically
win the
the
Super
price
Bowl,
that Dallas just paid Carolina for now
Jonathan
that
Mingo,
idiot. Thank you, Jonathan Mingo. And
Johnny
I mean,
Mingo.
Johnny Mingo. So yeah, it's the Brett Veach picks his spots, and if the Saints didn't have very many buyers on Lattimore, and Veach was on the list, then I get it. But he's not going to get into a bidding war and come out on top. That's just not really his style.
No, it's not. And obviously the Chiefs have to feel good, and you have to think the Chiefs obviously the Chiefs know better than anybody the long-term prognosis for all of these guys, for Hollywood Brown, for Jalen Watson,
Yeah.
for all the players that Charles Omenihu, who will be coming back at some point, it's got to be getting pretty close. Isaiah Pacheco, all these players that have an opportunity to come back. Obviously, the Chiefs have the inside scoop. They know what's going on with these players' injuries. And so I think, I mean, if you can add a guy like Marshawn Lattimore, who was not going to cost very much against the cap and is still a good player, if you can add him at a reasonable price, of course, why wouldn't you do that, even if Jalen Watson's coming back? But to your
Sure.
point, I think it speaks to the fact that hopefully a little bit of injury optimism there on the Chiefs side, because they weren't going to overpay for this. And we know from the fact that they made two moves already that the three-peat is really important to this team. So I
Hmm.
think if they really felt like there's no other way for us to add and make this team better. These guys aren't coming back. We have to make a move. I think Brett probably would have paid that price because we know how important the three-peat is to this team. Hopefully
Yeah.
that is, showing that the Chiefs are optimistic about these guys being able to come back and contribute down the stretch. Like you said, it just matters that they're available in January and February, and hopefully that will be the case. Speaking of which, we have not done this in a little while, but we're kind of we're basically at the halfway point of the season. I guess, do we hit it like on Thursday Night Football of the ninth week of the season? Because that's kind of like right in between. I mean, a 17 game schedule.
17's 8.5. So it's like
Yeah,
you've got to complete the eighth week and half the ninth week. So it would
sure.
be, yeah, it's weird. We're there. We're there. We're in week 10.
We're there. So we're going to talk about
What is happening?
what is happening halfway through the season. Let's look at the current AFC playoff standings and odds and just kind of talk through these teams. We obviously are sitting pretty. Kansas City Chiefs are 8-0 in first place in the AFC, in first place in the NFL, in first place in all
Our hearts.
football in the world. A 99% chance to make the playoffs per ESPN, a
Seems low.
97%. Yeah, right. It's actually greater than it's a greater than
Sure.
99%, but they won't
Sure.
give you the
It's like
percentage
they
point.
haven't clinched it, but
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
0%
Yeah,
chance that they're going to miss.
exactly.
But yeah,
It's
yeah.
greater than 99% is how it shows up on ESPN's playoff odds,
Love that.
and they're 97% to win the division. They're up to a 74% chance to earn the first round bye. It's week 10. So like, I mean, 74% to earn the first round bye in week 10 is honestly insane. This is
It
an
is.
incredibly favorable situation for the Chiefs.
It is. It's hilarious. And I mean, I suppose if I had more time, I would like to go back in time in the NFL and see just how, sitting pretty a team was on top of their conference after
Yeah,
9 weeks.
right.
And I mean, I know that teams have gotten out to hot starts. There have obviously the Chiefs are far from the only 8-0 team in NFL history. So I know that there have been situations like this. It's just really it's magnified with the one bye because this is winning a playoff game if you clinch that one seed. And the fact that if the Chiefs were 8-0 and you've got a couple other teams a half game back or one game back or whatever, you're in an absolute dogfight. But everyone else has lost at least 2 games, and we'll talk about that. And it's great. It's the best possible, especially going for a three-peat and putting all your chips on the table for the Super Bowl. I mean, this is the most Super Bowl or bust team that's ever existed is the Chiefs. And it's great to be in this position. Love to see it.
I have a quick note. This is not related to what is happening, but it is news. Creed is playing in Kansas City tonight,
Correct.
and I'm not into Creed at all. I actually despise the band Creed. I think their music is terrible. But Scott Stapp did just bring Creed Humphrey on stage at the Creed show.
Sick.
So
Sure. Eric
that is
Stonestreet's
pretty exciting.
there.
Can't wait to see the video of that. That's going
The
to be
band was at Monday Night Football, so
gonna be
obviously Creed and Creed are buddies.
sure, that's going to be great. So in second place in the AFC currently, the 7-2 Buffalo Bills, who the Chiefs will see next week after they hopefully dispatch the Broncos. The Bills have a 99% chance, a greater than 99% chance to win their division, the AFC East, because the second best team in their division is the 3-6 New York Jets, who
That's
they have
crazy.
already beaten once. They have beaten the Jets, Patriots, and Dolphins once each, so they're 3-0 in the division currently. They are 2 games back of Kansas City in the loss column, so they have just a 17% chance at the first round bye. Baltimore and Buffalo are the only teams that have any appreciable percentage at the first round bye. And really, when you consider the fact that the Chiefs have 3 games up in the loss column on Baltimore and have the head-to-head over them, I mean, really,
Right.
the Chiefs would have to really blow it to let Baltimore back into the picture. I think that takes into account the fact that Baltimore is a very good team and we expect them to do well the rest of the season. But I mean, this game coming up against the Bills in 2 weeks is, I mean, the Chiefs could basically, essentially, not mathematically, but essentially, for all intents and purposes, clinch the 1 seed. In addition to the Bills already having 2 more losses, they have a pretty tough remaining schedule. They have the Chiefs, they still play the Niners, they have to go to Los Angeles to play the Rams, and they also have to go to Detroit, which is just an absolute nightmare place to play right now. So
Yeah. The Bills
number 2 for now.
They're interesting. They have the quarterback. Obviously, we've talked a lot about Josh Allen on this show and what we think of him, and despite it being funny and fun to make fun of him when he happens to turn the ball over a lot, he's not doing that this year at all. In fact, he's playing incredible. And the 7-2 record, they've got a 4-game lead on their division with 8 to go, which means theoretically they could clinch their division in 2 weeks. If everyone else in their division loses and the Bills keep winning, then 2 weeks from now they could be 6 up with 6 to play. And that's significant. That just means that their entire focus can be away from the AFC East and any trap games or any whatever, and they can just focus on getting ready for the playoffs, which is an area that, I mean, we all know that the Bills have struggled.
Sure.
And
Yeah, they need
and
to
if
get
they
ready for the
can,
playoffs.
last year they spent so much energy digging out of the hole that they put themselves in to make the playoffs. And of course, at the end of the year, they were balancing between missing the playoffs or being the 2 seed, and they ended up getting the 2 seed, but it was stressful games all throughout the end of the year. And there's an element to that can be helpful to a team, but obviously I think the Bills ran out of gas by the time they played the Chiefs. And a rested and hungry Bills team is not exactly a team that I'm excited to play in the playoffs by any means, but they've got to prove it. They haven't proved it yet. They're on their way to locking up at least a first home game, and wild card and division round, probably a home game before you would think they would travel to Arrowhead in some type of AFC championship showdown. Obviously, a lot of football to go, but they're really impressive. They've impressed me. I thought when they got rid of all their offensive skill players Diggs certainly, that they would take a big step back, and they really haven't. They've kept on chugging.
Yeah, they've been good, but they are still coached by Sean McDermott, who does have a tendency to wet his pants in the big moments. And of course, no moment's bigger than the 3 times they played the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs. And although he was the hero last week, I can't believe Tyler Bass is still their kicker. Like, he drilled the shit out of that kick last week.
61-yarder to win.
It was 61-yarders right down the middle, and it cleared it by 4 or 5 yards, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been good from probably 65, 66, and I think it was into the wind as well. That being said, he missed a kick and an extra pointer in that same game. So, I mean, he's
still a weakness for them. Still a weakness.
He's been really shaky. It's amazing the Buffalo Bills' ability to hang on to players, coaches that aren't proven playoff performers, and in fact are the opposite of proven playoff performers. They're proven playoff chokers, just like the Buffalo Bills themselves. In third place, the 6-2 Pittsburgh Steelers, a half game lead currently over the Ravens. Those teams still have to play each other twice, which is partly why the Steelers have just a 32% chance to win the AFC North, whereas the Ravens still have a 64% chance to win the division. And they are, however, up to an 87% chance to make the playoffs with Russell Wilson playing their quarterback in 2024.
They're an interesting story. Obviously, making a quarterback change midway in the year, which they did from Fields to Wilson, and having it work is not usually the norm in the NFL. And I mean, we'll see if Russ turns back into a pumpkin. If he does, there will be not a single person shocked, maybe outside of Pittsburgh, in the whole league, if Russell Wilson kind of turns back into the Denver version of Russell Wilson. But at the time, right now, they've won 6 games. Their defense is good. They've got TJ Watt. They've got some solid pieces. And of course, they have what might be the second best coach in the NFL in Mike Tomlin. Their floor, the Pittsburgh Steelers floor since he's been there has been 500. That's been the worst they've ever done. And it just, I don't think I take them seriously. We're the top of the conference, and we've got to assess all these other teams as far as threats to the Chiefs and matchups with the Chiefs and kind of how we view them. And I mean, I think I'm still looking at Pittsburgh as not a concern at all in any way. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe we'll see when they match up on Christmas, and then we'll see if the Steelers make some noise in the playoffs. But right now, I love that the Steelers are the 3rd seed in the AFC because they seem pretty beatable to me.
Absolutely. And that 3 seed Steelers are followed by the 4 seed Houston Texans, who are 6-3, disappointing on offense this year. Just lost Stephon Diggs for the year. He wasn't lighting the world on fire there, but still a useful player at his age. They do get Nico Collins back this week. And thank God for my dynasty team where I enjoyed Nico Collins' services.
He's a monster.
Missed that guy. Their interior offensive line has just been an absolute disaster. They're sort of like the Bizarro Chiefs. Their defense is very good, just like the Chiefs says. But instead of having the best interior offensive line in the league, as the Chiefs do, like literally PFF voted the Chiefs 2 guards and center all pros. I mean, like literally
all number 1 at their position.
Yeah, exactly. But the Texans are the exact opposite of that. The interior of that offensive line can't protect at all. They do still have a 94% chance to win their division because the AFC South is incredibly weak this year, back to where it belongs. We saw last year, we were thinking, Jags, Colts, Texans, young quarterbacks, up and comers. Maybe this will be a division on the rise. Nope. The 4-5 Colts are starting Joe Flacco. They're 2 games back, and they already have lost the head-to-head tiebreaker because they are 0-2 against the Texans. This team is cruising towards an AFC South title, but I don't know how seriously to take them as a threat. And obviously the Chiefs will get to see them up close in December. But by that point, the game might not actually mean that much.
Right. They're definitely fine for the division and they're fine for a top four seed in the playoffs, but probably the fourth based on how everything else is going. I don't see them leapfrogging. They definitely aren't going to leapfrog the Bills, and I don't see them leapfrogging whoever comes out of the North, whether that's the Steelers or Ravens. And they've like you said, they've been disappointing. It hasn't been the CJ Stroud light show from last year, rookie of the year, where he just lit the place on fire. Losing Stephon Diggs, despite him, maybe not being the biggest in the box score, was a big part of their offense. And that line, he's been sacked 31 times so far in
Yeah.
9 games. Like, he's just been taking a beating, and I don't see how that can be sustainable for playoff success. I can see how they've gotten by. Those two Colts wins, they won by 3-2. It's not like they were blowing the Colts out in the 2 times they beat them either. So I'm really surprised at this 6-3 version of the Texans is a bad 6-3. I mean, they have not been good, and they lost to the Jets on last Thursday Night Football. They've got the Lions coming up this week, so I mean, they could be on a bit of a tailspin here soon. So I just I thought they would be the challengers. I really didn't see Buffalo being like the team in the driver's seat to challenge the Chiefs. I thought that would be the Texans, just based on vibes and based on how last year ended, but not the case.
Yeah, they still have to play the Ravens too on Christmas. So
Yeah.
one of those teams is going to take another loss. And let's turn to those 6-3 Ravens right now. Still everybody's darling. I mean, there's still people in this world in November 2024 that have the Ravens ahead of the Chiefs in their power rankings. Looking at you, theringer.com. But
6-3
team
Ravens over the
is
8-0 Chiefs.
this team is 6-3. They lost the head-to-head with Kansas City. They just they just have a little bit of a bozo streak in them, and this is just kind of how the Baltimore Ravens operate. Like, they just laid a 41-10 beat down on the Broncos, which we're going to talk about a few more times in this podcast today.
Mm-hmm.
They sandwiched that in between a pretty dominant 41-31 win over the Buccaneers, which is not nearly as close as the final score would indicate, with a 29-24 loss to the Cleveland Browns and Jameis Winston. They lost the first 2 games of the year against the Chiefs, and then they lost to the Raiders. The Raiders are 2-7, right? I mean, they're one of the worst teams in the league.
Tied for the worst record in the league.
And the Ravens had a huge lead in that game, and they blew it to Gardner Minshew. I mean, it just they are a 97% chance to make the playoffs. They have a 64% chance to win the division. They have just a 3% chance to bye because they've already lost to us. They're already 3 back in the loss column, and they really have a pretty tough schedule left too. They have a divisional game against the Bengals this Thursday. They still have to play the Steelers twice. They have to go on the road at Los Angeles to play the Chargers and in Houston. And then they have the Eagles at home in December, who are suddenly, white hot. But they did add the ghost of Tre'Davious White, who is going to be cut by the Rams, and wide receiver Deontay Johnson, who, unlike DeAndre Hopkins, he was not active the week after he came in because, I guess they don't need him as much, but also he's just not as good a player.
Yeah, the Ravens are so interesting for so many reasons.
Yeah, they are.
They are extremely explosive and dynamic when they're on. When things are working for the Ravens, it looks better than any other team in the league, including the Chiefs, including the Bills. Hell, they beat the hell out of the Bills when the Bills came to Baltimore earlier this year. But I think a bozo streak is the perfect way to put it. They just don't seem to be able to put it together all the time. And if your floor is really low, which the Ravens' floor is low, their ceiling's incredibly high.
It is.
But their floor is really low. Lose to the Raiders and the Browns.
Okay, especially when you consider their playoff history.
Correct. That's exactly right. I mean, Lamar isn't very good in the playoffs. And, Lamar's already been doing the mysterious missing practices shit that he has been known for the last couple of years, where his tum-tum starts to hurt. And next thing you know, he's going to – they're so confounding because they have the best rush game in the league between Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. I mean, we knew that was going to probably happen. It didn't quite manifest itself early on. They didn't quite know how to use Derrick Henry, but now they've figured out, we got to hand him the ball and let him go to work. I know that was a tough nut to crack,
tough
but
to figure out, but they
once they did, it's worked. He leads the NFL in both rush attempts and yards per attempt, which is an impossible thing to lead in both
That's
categories.
crazy.
I mean, Jim Brown was the last one to do that. And it just shows that they're really effective on the ground. They've got, I mean, Zay Flowers is a really nice player. They score points when they need to. It's just their defense has been struggling, and they've blown more fourth quarter leads than any team in football since the start of 2022. Like a lot of them. I think it's 8 or 9 at this point. And they've already lost 3
every
times.
game they've lost. I mean,
it is
pretty much every game they've lost. When they lose,
they don't get blown out. They're like the Chiefs in that way. You don't just start to finish beat the Ravens down. But if you can hold on and then it comes to the fourth quarter, you've got a pretty good shot. And it'll be really interesting to see what they do against the Bengals on Thursday and how they do moving forward, because with 3 losses, with 2 of them early, they started off 0-2, and I just think that they're setting themselves up for a road playoff game, whether that's to Buffalo if it's 3-2 or something, or whether they've got to come to Kansas City. And I just don't trust this team to go on the road in the playoffs and win a big game. Now, maybe they'll do it for the first time, and everyone's got a first time where they finally get over that hump, and maybe they can. But they're so weird because they're so good, but they're so unreliable.
Yeah, no, definitely. Speaking of teams that are unreliable, I would not add the so good part of it to it, but
sure.
Surprise.
I knew
number 6
you sent that out.
Yeah, it's the 5-3 Los Angeles Chargers. This team somehow has a 78% chance to make the playoffs, according to ESPN, which is crazy. I mean, I get that they're 5-3, and we're going to talk about the other teams that are on the bubble. Of course, they have essentially 0 odds to win the division. They're technically at 3%. We do still have to play them one more time, but we already have the early head-to-head over them. And then, of course, you're 3 games up. It's 8-0 against 5-3. This team is odd. I mean, it just is. It seems to be not the same old Chargers. I think that, Jim Harbaugh has come in and he has.
Good job.
Yeah, thank you. He certainly has brought a different culture. We'll see if it is sustainable. We'll see if it is a winning culture, but it certainly is different than the usual same old Chargers sort of mentality. Same shit, different verse.
Sure.
But they have to maintain it.
They do. And that's the problem for them, is that they've shown flashes. They're similar story to a lot of these other AFC teams. I was going to say the Ravens, but really a ton of these teams where when it goes well, you can squint and you can see like, oh, I get why this team's good, but they just don't maintain it. They just don't. They can't keep it up for a long time. And the 3 losses that the Chargers have had this year are to 3 division leaders. They've lost to the Steelers by 10. They lost to Chiefs by 7. And they lost a game at Arizona. Now, Arizona's 5-4 and leading the NFC West. But other than that, their wins are against the Raiders and Panthers, who are bad. The Broncos, who are fine. We'll talk about them. The Saints, who completely have collapsed and fired their coach and did. I mean, they're as bad of a team as there is in the NFL right now. And then the Browns. And it just doesn't. That was Jameis's first game of fully starting after last week's heroics against the Ravens. He came back down to earth in a home game against the Chargers. So I just think that the Chargers are benefiting from an easy schedule, and they're benefiting from beating bad teams, but they can't beat the good teams yet. And that's about where you would expect like a 6 seed type of team to be, is like, yeah, they're 500. They're fine. They're 5-3. I mean, that's better than 500, but they don't put the fear into anybody. They seem like a sacrificial lamb. Like someone's going to beat them in the first round of the playoffs. And that's fine. That's better than the Chargers have done lately. So what can you do?
Now, you mentioned the Denver Broncos, and you also mentioned teams that are doing better than they have lately. And here we have another surprise team in 7th place in the AFC, clinging to the last playoff spot at the season end of the day. It's your Denver Broncos. This team has lower playoff odds at 5-4 and 35% on the playoff odds than the 2 teams below them, the 4-5 Colts and the 4-5 Cincinnati Bengals. They were feeling themselves after they blew out the 2 worst teams in football who just played each other. And there were some hilarious tweets coming out from our former chief friend, Colin Saunders, after they lost to the Panthers. Absolute booty cheeks. But they beat both of those teams, just absolutely blew those teams out. Saints, as you mentioned, are on a 7-game losing streak. They haven't won since week 2, and they just fired their coach. And the Panthers, just beat the Saints for their second win of the year. So these teams are literally, I think, for my money, the two worst teams in football. Broncos played them on back-to-back weeks, blew them both out, and
Yep.
then they had to go to Baltimore. And I'll tell you, the hype here in Denver was out of control. I mean, people were calling it the biggest game since Super Bowl 50 for the Broncos,
Holy
which
shit.
like may not have been
That
a
is
total
sad.
exaggeration because I mean they haven't played in any big
No, it
games.
might not be an exaggeration. It's just
Might
sad that
actually
it might
be
not
true,
be.
but yes,
Yeah.
it is sad that it was a reasonable statement of fact. They also said in the same breath that this could be a playoff rematch down the road. And that was very funny to me
Holy
because of
shit.
course, I mean they really thought that they were going to
Ooh.
be competitive in this game. And then they got beat by 31.
What year did they think it was going to be a playoff rematch?
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's crazy. Well, the one thing about the Broncos, they're delusional. We've known that for a long time.
Oh, we'll talk about
they've
that.
thought every single. We will talk about that when we talk about them in more detail this week. I will just say they don't quite know who they are this year. They just traded Baron Browning, so are they sellers? But they're 5-4, so are they buyers? Are they? They lost their first two games of the year, so were they going to be awful? But then they went on a 3-game winning streak right after that. Bo Nix is awful, and yet has been pretty good also at times.
Right.
It's been weird. And they lost that game to the Chargers. They beat the Bucs on the road, which was their first win of the year and really impressive. But then after that horrible rainy game against the Jets 10-9 where both teams were handing the game back and forth to each other and no one wanted to take it. Eventually Greg Zuerlein missed enough kicks for the Jets that the Broncos just kind of won it by default. And then they beat the Raiders, which everyone's doing, and then lost the Chargers, beat the Saints, except the Ravens. Exactly. Most everyone's beating the Raiders. And then that stretch where they played two of the worst teams in football and then lost to one of the better teams in football. And so they're, again, a lot like the Chargers where, like, okay, they're probably winning the games they should win and they're probably losing the games that they should lose. And if that gets them to the middle of the pack and they pick in the middle round in the draft and they don't win a playoff game and they don't do anything, and are they going to keep Bo Nix and Sean Payton together for a while? That seems to be the plan. Is that a good plan? Is that a bad plan? They're just schizophrenic. They just don't know. And I'm excited to further make them doubt themselves this week.
Me too. We'll talk about that obviously when we get to the game preview, but let's talk about the two teams on the bubble. There are, of course, teams other than these two, but the next closest team to the playoff picture are the 3-6 Jets. They have a lot of work to do to dig out of their deep hole that they crafted for themselves, and they did take a step in the right direction, beating the Texans obviously last Thursday. But we have the aforementioned Indianapolis Colts, who at 4-5, excuse me, have a 38% chance to make the playoffs, and the Bengals also at 4-5 with a 37% chance to make the playoffs. But if the Bengals lose tomorrow night on Thursday Night Football, they will be 4-6 and down to a 24% chance to make the playoffs. These Bengals have had the second easiest schedule in the NFL so far, and they're below 500. They still have the 12th easiest schedule rest of the season because they're playing the last place schedule. And yeah, I mean, it's Baby Town Frolics, but that schedule does include a game at the Chargers, at Dallas, which probably is not going to be a difficult game given how Dallas is trending. But if they get Dak back, they get Micah Parsons back, maybe that team shows a little fight down the stretch to save Mike McCarthy's job.
I mean, if it's a regular season game, Dallas might be okay.
Sure, they might show up, and they still have to play Pittsburgh home and away. So playing the Steelers twice, they still have to play the Browns, and they have to play the Broncos at home. So that could end up being a pretty pivotal game for this 7th spot in the playoffs. Broncos and Bengals. Yeah. If the Bengals lose 2 games, I mean, I think they're probably toast at that point. They're at a 7th loss. If they lose even 1 or 2 more games against the wrong opponents, the one that's directly above them in the standings, they might be toast anyway.
They might. And what a sad story that would be, because they definitely they're a team that we all like to root for. And it would just be too bad to see them fall on their faces with all of the good guys that are in Cincinnati and all those nice fans and all that stuff. So we're all cheering for them here in Kansas City and across the league, really.
It would be just absolutely incredible to see the Bengals in the playoffs.
Join over 5 million fans that are already playing on Underdog with their Champs game. You could win money by making entries with your favorite players. You could win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on player stats like passing yards, interceptions, touchdowns, and more. Every dog deserves a second chance, and with Underdog Rescues, you can get your money back and receive a promo if an early injury causes your entry to lose, which is one of the more Underdog-specific types of rules that they have. They're really in it for the player, I feel like. Vulture protection's another thing like that. If you select a designated running back to score a touchdown in the pick'em entry and they get vultured by their backup running back, Underdog will rescue your entry. And Red Zone Rush is a fun game that is pretty unique to Underdog as well. Just pick whether or not a player will score a touchdown by swiping right for yes and left for no, and your entry will be automatically boosted, and you'll get a 51% profit boost when you play. I have had a lot of fun with Underdog, of course, over the years. This week, I'm looking at Mahomes to keep it rolling against the Broncos. I'm going higher on 233.5 passing yards and higher on 1.5 passing touchdowns. He just got it going again this week on Monday Night Football against the Bucs. So, I mean, I think I cashed that last week, and I plan to ride it and let the Chiefs passing game kind of fill my pockets for a while. The addition of DeAndre Hopkins has really just turned things around for that passing game. I think we can expect more fireworks. So download the app today. Must use code KINGDOM, KINGDOM, to get $1,000 bonus cash instantly. Download the app today. Use promo code KINGDOM. Get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Select higher or lower with your favorite player and cash in on Underdog. Higher or lower, you make the call. Every play, every touchdown. Just select higher or lower on Underdog. Must be 18 or older, 19 or older in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 or older in Colorado for some games, 21 or older in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369.
Let's turn to the Chiefs' thrilling victory to stay unbeaten on Monday Night Football. It took overtime, but the Chiefs prevail over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 30-24. And if there was ever a Chiefs system game, boy, this was it.
Pretty Chiefs system-y of them. Of course, this is the system that the Chiefs use to win football games. You know it, you love it. It is create drama, handle adversity, inspire hope, engage physically, finish strong, and separate entirely. Shout out to the Dennis system and Always Sunny for the inspiration. Let's get into it. Let's get into creating some drama. As is the case with most of these games, especially with the two-time defending champs that are on an undefeated streak, every one of these games feels like they just have more drama than all the rest of the league combined in all of their games. Like, nobody has drama like the Chiefs do. This one was Monday Night Football, 7-0 record, a Super Bowl 55 rematch that none of us want to talk about, but the Bucs are still on the minds of Chiefs fans everywhere. Baker versus Mahomes in the big rematch. They've played a couple times in the pros, obviously, but everyone always goes back to the 66-59 college game between Oklahoma and Texas Tech. And 3 or 4 weeks ago, if I had told you, Austin, that the Chiefs would have the best wide receiver in this game, you might have thought that meant that the Chiefs had traded for the Bucs for Mike Evans or something like that. But no, of course, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin were out for the Bucs, and DeAndre Hopkins was very much in for the Chiefs. We will, of course, talk about that. The drama then spilled into the early parts of the game. A lot of it was lack of execution by the Chiefs, which, stop me if you've heard that one before, but there was a missed shot to Xavier Worthy on the first drive of the game down the left sideline. He failed to stay in bounds, what would have been a walk-in 33-yard touchdown, but instead, third down, sack, leads to a punt, and the Chiefs knock the Chiefs out of field goal range, so they punt it back to the Bucs, and then the Chiefs on defense, of course, force a quick punt by Tampa of their own, and then on the next drive, Mahomes feeds Hopkins on back-to-back plays for 8 yards, and then 17 yards, which was a really nifty RPO pass. Showed off Mahomes' fastball in a way that we haven't seen much of lately. He just pulled the ball down, and boy, that ball was out of there in a hurry, and Hopkins snagged it. It was a rainy night. It would have been, a lot of these catches would be pretty challenging, but of course not for the future Hall of Famer. And they get down all the way to the Tampa 20, back in the red zone, and the Chiefs try this end around to Worthy. It wasn't blocked well. Mahomes was kind of supposed to be the lead block on the outside, and that didn't really work, but Worthy didn't really help the situation with his own play. Ran right into a 10-yard loss. Did not look like the fastest player in the league on that play. Sure would have liked to have seen his speed show up a little bit more there. So the Chiefs kicked the field goal. They watched Tampa Bay march 70 yards in 11 plays in 7 minutes to take the lead with a touchdown by Kansas City native Rachaad White. That drive included 2 third down conversions to Sterling Shepard, who I think a lot of people didn't realize was a Buck, but with all their injuries, he stepped up, and there was a very phantom third down defensive hold call on Trent McDuffie where the refs didn't even call it on the right number at first, and then the replay kind of came back, and they were like, "Oh no, actually it was on McDuffie," and everyone was like, "Well, that's not a penalty either." Anyways, 7-3 Bucks, game on.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly was a dramatic start to the game. The worthy miss just really riled up Troy Aikman. I mean, he was talking about it the rest of the game, which is hilarious. I mean, he got to be in his bonnet about that. It's a bad play by Worthy, but he was open, and I mean, he's had a rough go of it the last month, ever since Rasheed got hurt, and he's sort of been asked to take on a little bit bigger role in the offense. And now that Hopkins is here to stay, maybe he can go back to having a little bit more of a niche role, and give him an opportunity to develop a little bit more. It was not a good play by him, but it was a great ball. Not a great ball, but a good ball by Pat. I mean, we've seen Pat miss him deep several times already this year. And at least this was, I mean, it should have been caught and it should have been a touchdown. And to your point, I mean, it was clear that Pat wanted to challenge the Bucs down the field in this game. And I don't know if that had anything to do with Antoine Winfield Jr. saying that he had the the peace sign ready to go. I don't know if that I didn't see Mahomes make the peace sign. That would have been extremely good as a touchdown celebration, Pat doing the peace sign. But he was chucking the ball around the yard in not ideal conditions. I mean, this was a rainy game, weather game. The rain got worse as the game went on, but Mahomes kept on ticking. And, I mean, it wouldn't be a Chiefs game if there wasn't a little bit of drama created. You would think that, I mean, for all the juice that you bring up, pregame, this was an NFC opponent, an NFC South opponent coming on the road without, their top receivers in this game. And this is a game that the Chiefs should win. And yet they did find a way to create some drama. I was pretty zen even after the 7-3 lead, because I just didn't believe in my heart of hearts that the Bucs could possibly challenge Chiefs for this game. I was wrong about that.
This is what I do, Ernie. This is what I do. We just have to get used to that. So, handle adversity. We have seen it time and time again throughout the dynasty, throughout this year specifically. The Chiefs lose the lead. They answer with a touchdown drive. This time it was an 11-play, 70-yard, 6-minute and 18-second drive that had a 3rd and 10 throw to Justin Watson for 19 yards, and then the play of the night, the one that we will remember for a long time, a 3rd and 8 conversion. With Mahomes in trouble, pocket collapsing, he just teleports the ball 35 yards down the field into double coverage, lets Nick Hopkins make a play on the ball. He comes down with the 3. I mean, of course, that was why you go and get DeAndre Hopkins. Contested, middle of the field, have to have it, 3rd down. There's zero chance any Chief outside of Tyreek Hill in the last 5 years makes that play. I mean, it was unbelievable. And maybe not even Tyreek. It was awesome. Right. So, of course, the drive was capped on another 3rd down conversion, which we'll talk about some more, on a throw to Hopkins from the 1. And the Chiefs were back in the driver's seat. They were back up 10-7. A couple drives later, halftime arrives. It's still 10-7. Then the Bucs start the 3rd quarter off with a touchdown drive, their own longer kind of march right down the field, and a 14-10 lead. The Chiefs then, after surrendering the lead, go 3 and out and pump the ball back, and the Bucs convert on a 3rd and 7 play around midfield as George Karlaftis and Tershawn Wharton both get injured on the same play. They're both down after a 3rd and 7 conversion to Cade Otton, and the Bucs end up kicking a field goal and take a 17-10 lead. Now, I've got a whole second stanza for handle adversity. So before I keep going, your thoughts on the Nook play, his contributions up to this point, and what that moment was like.
First of all, great use of the word stanza, underutilized word.
Yeah.
Second of all, I'm glad that you gave me an opportunity to jump in here because, we have to keep talking about DeAndre Hopkins forever and always. This was such a unique highlight in the history of Mahomes highlights because Mahomes doesn't like to throw into triple coverage because he's not an idiot. And the Chiefs so rarely are in a position where they have to force a throw. Mahomes didn't have to force a throw in this. Now he did. It was certainly a tight little window
Yeah.
that he was throwing to on the receiving end, there was also not a lot of space for him to get rid of this ball, but he could have gotten rid of the ball. And he could have, Chiefs could have kicked the field goal. Instead, he hucks it up there to a guy who'd been on the team for 11 days and didn't, I mean, he said he may have run the wrong route. I've seen some film guys break this down, and he ran the first part of the route correctly and then realized he wasn't going to be able to win on that route. So and he sees Pat,
Ad-libbed.
getting pressured. And so he just, like goats do, he just ran towards the end zone. And I mean, for Mahomes you got to think, like, I mean, so much of football, ever since, Bill Walsh and the West Coast offense kind of came into existence, where they're practicing all these specific routes and timings, everything is timed out. Yeah, everything is choreographed. Before Bill Walsh, that's not how NFL offenses worked. And, he came in and blew everybody's tits off with that. And that's how NFL offenses work now. It's all based off of timing. The routes are supposed to be crisp. That's how you can make anticipatory throws, because your guy is going to be at a specific spot at a specific time. Mahomes doesn't have the benefit of any of that, and he still throws this ball to a spot on the field. I mean, like, just think of what goes into making the mental calculation to even know where DeAndre Hopkins is going to be at the time the ball arrives. When you have been throwing to the guy for 10 days and he's not running a route that's in the playbook, right? Like, just think
that's just ability, man.
Yeah,
just God-given ability.
Just think of the mental math that you have to do to kind of work that out. And then the ball is, I mean, like, obviously the spot that he has to throw from, the pocket is collapsed. He's stepping up into what used to be the pocket and getting squeezed, and has to just put the ball, I mean, almost straight up in the air like a rainbow shot. And that also all has to factor into the calculations as well, right? You're not throwing a bullet down the field. It's not a line drive. It's a rainbow that you're going to have to drop directly into his hands. And then he does it. And then, of course, Nook catches it, which, like, the best part of this highlight for me, the throw is great. The best part of the highlight for me is the catch, which is so rare for us as Chiefs fans. We had, Kelsey's circus catch in the playoffs last year was a lot of fun, and he's had a lot of circus catches over the years. But
which Kelsey circus catch?
The one against the Ravens.
And the Ravens when he dives for it.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Okay.
But the Chiefs just don't, because of the nature of the offense, and Mahomes does such a good job of getting receivers open by scrambling and getting outside the pocket and manipulating the defense with his eyes and his arm angles, that he just so rarely is throwing to a guy who is triple. I mean, like, we were talking about this off air the other day, and, like, I can't remember the last time he threw into triple coverage. I just can't. I'm sure there have been times that he's done it. He's probably even completed it a handful of times, and I'm just not remembering the play off the top of my head. This play was, like, completely unique. The catch was incredible. I mean, he showed off everything that he is known for with the catch radius and the huge hands. We talked about it. He's basically got giant webbed hands. I mean, that's how you come down with that ball in that situation. Incredible. It was amazing.
He's so reliable and instantly reliable. I mean, it's just such a luxury to have. And Mahomes, for his part, also always knows time, score, game situation in every play. Always. We've never seen him with his pants down and not understanding exactly what needs to happen on a play. And he knew it was 3rd and 8 from midfield. And if he takes a sack there, then we're probably just going to punt. And best case scenario is the other team comes up with it at the 3 on the punt. So, like, let's just throw it down there, and they're probably going to, if it's triple coverage, and if one of them wants to jump in front of that, and I'll take my 10th pick of the year. I'm already throwing more picks than ever, so it doesn't really matter, and that's basically an arm punt, but I've also got a Hall of Famer down there, and best case scenario for us is that he comes down with it, and of course, that's exactly what happened, and legends are born, and Nook tweets the image of Randy Moss and Tom Brady after the game, and I mean, we'll talk about him obviously more as this game goes on, but it was great. It was a lot of fun. So we are still in the middle of handling adversity. So I had to do a little break there and talk about that play. But the Chiefs are down 7 points in the 3rd quarter. and the Bucs had just kicked that field goal to take that lead. But this time, the answer was a 12-play, 70-yard, 6-minute and 36-second drive. Stop me if you've heard the Chiefs are going on a long drive before. Featured 2 third-down conversions and ended with Mahomes injuring his ankle, as we've just got a shudder in my spine when I said it, on a game-tying touchdown pass to Samaje Perine where it was non-contact. He stepped to throw. I'll be honest, my Mahomes injury PTSD, as you just heard when I even tried to recap that, kicked in big time after that play. I mean, I was pale white, and non-contact injuries are the worst types of injuries. I would have much rather seen a guy blow him up than to just see him go down without anybody touching him. 2 players have to help him to the sideline, have to put him up on their... I really don't want to dwell here because I'm itching to get to Inspire Hope for obvious reasons. So I'll just say that this was their 8th drive of the year, the Chiefs, the game-tying drive, of 12 or more plays, 70 or more yards, and 6 or more minutes. This was their 8th of that in the season. The NFL average is 2.4 of those drives per team so far this year, and the Chiefs have already had their bye, and a lot of teams haven't. And nobody else has more than 6 of those drives, and the Chiefs have 8. Only 7 teams have even done it more than 4 times. So
it's crazy.
You add into that the long drive ability, of course, goes hand in hand with their third down conversion rate right now, which is on a historic rate. They're the 2nd best third down team in the last 15 years through 9 weeks. And, they're the long drive kings right now. So we'll talk about the injury here in a little bit, but what about this team's ability to just maintain drives constantly?
I mean, it's amazing. And especially when you think about how bad the Chiefs have been on short yardage the last couple of years.
Right.
And, the Blake Bell, secret quarterback sneaks that they were running because they wouldn't let Mahomes do the quarterback sneak. And probably after this latest scare, it certainly will not do ever again. I mean, they haven't wheeled it out in 2 Super Bowls. So I feel like, if you were ever going to use it, that would have been, they
haven't wheeled it out in 4 Super Bowls.
I know. Right. Exactly.
They
would have run it in one of those 4 Super Bowl opportunities, if they were ever going to bring it back, but they're not going to. And, that puts the Chiefs at a little bit of a disadvantage when you're in short yardage, but they also just haven't been good in short yardage situations, which is weird because the core of that offensive line, Tooney, Smith, and Creed, they've been together now for 3 seasons, and it's the same guys. But you're just seeing them take all of that to another level this year. And I think Kareem Hunt is a big part of that too. Like I'm excited for Pacheco to come back, but I'm not convinced that Kareem Hunt is not the best running back on the roster. And I would, frankly, I think the Chiefs offense loses something if, Pacheco comes back and Kareem is relegated to anything less than the workhorse role that he's in now. I just think he brings such a physicality, man. And it really is. He even popped a couple of, he
had a 15-yarder in this one. Look at him.
Yeah, exactly. Some of his longest runs of the year. And really he was getting, when you get ahead of steam, he's just compared to Pacheco, he knows when and how to hit the hole. And Pacheco is certainly a violent runner, and Kareem is as well. Right. Pacheco just doesn't have Kareem's vision. He just doesn't have his decisiveness. And it's really fun to watch that, whether it be, on first down or whether it be on, 3rd or 4th down on short yardage, because that he is going to fight for every inch. And, 9 times out of 10, it's working. The Chiefs are moving the change or they're scoring a touchdown.
I'm really glad you brought up Kareem Hunt because we have a whole letter devoted to him here in a little bit. So we'll have some more Kareem takes here in a second. But before we get to Kareem's part, Inspire Hope. Panic over. Patrick Mahomes comes out of the injury tent. He's jogging on the sidelines. He's walking on his own. He comes back into the game before you can even say Carson Wentz's name. I know you were feeling some kind of way when we didn't know if Pat was okay because I was feeling the same thing. There's not much more inspiring as a Chiefs fan than a Mahomes injury that turns out to not be a big deal and he comes back into the game. What was that moment like?
I mean, I thought he was out for the year, and I think a lot
Yeah.
of people thought that because whenever you have a non-contact injury, that that I mean, almost always, if a player is going out with a non-contact injury, and it was a wet playing surface, that never helps.
Correct.
You know, it's down near the end zone. It just is like, how many times do you see a player pull up like that with a non-contact injury
And
and
he's fine.
not be able to put weight on it? And he's fine. And he's
Yeah,
back in
never.
the
This
game
is the first time I've ever
like
seen
3 minutes later. It's like it's almost I can't. I'm sure there have been times that it's happened. I can't think of a single example of it off the top of my head, but it just goes to show that Mahomes is he's a freak. I mean, he is a freak, and everybody's watched Quarterback, the Netflix series. Bobby Stroup is in that documentary talking about obviously the different things he does to work on his flexibility. We've seen him win a Super Bowl on a high ankle sprain. We've seen him in essentially every Super Bowl run dealing with some kind of lower body ailment, and it just doesn't seem to slow him down at all. There was a clip that came out today from NFL Films of Andy Reid asking, you know, if he wants him to take him out of the game, and of course he's like, no, man, no. He doesn't get as animated as he did. Yeah, exactly. He doesn't get as animated as he did, obviously, in the Jaguars game in the playoffs a couple years ago, where they forced him out of the game.
Fuck!
But yeah, right. He doesn't get quite that animated, but he just, I mean, he's adamant that he doesn't want to come out of the game. And it is worth mentioning that I don't want to bag on Anthony Richardson. He's catching strays, you know, Colts quarterback. Like, we live in a day and age where guys will tap out of a play because they're tired. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. What I am saying is that I don't see these types of videos from any other quarterback in the National Football League, right? Like,
Yeah, that's a good point.
I've never seen a mic'd up, you know, NFL Films clip where a quarterback other than Mahomes is being like, hell no, you're not taking me out of the game. It's like, you know, it's like your ace starting pitcher, you know, game 7 of the World Series and the game is on the line. And, you know, the manager goes out to take the ball and he's like, fuck no, I'm keeping it. Like,
Yeah,
I'm literally,
here.
I'm not giving you the ball. Like, I'm not giving it to you. I'm just going to, I'm staying in the game.
Yeah.
It's a sight to behold, man.
He's the best. Else. He's absolutely the best. I mean, we've talked about this a number of times, but we were at the game in Denver with the knee, and I was at the game, the Jags game, playoff game. Mahomes being down, seriously, is my nightmare. I mean, it's the closest thing I have to like a son because I don't have one, and just the pit in my stomach that I felt when those players were helping him and holding him under his arms. I just felt like, oh my God, like not only is that the season, that's the three-peat, that's a potential undefeated season.
All up in smoke.
It's just everything that we've been anticipating for a long time is just gone. And instead, he just was totally fine. I mean, when he jogged back out of that tent and had his helmet on and they said, you know, the sideline reporter said he's coming back in the game, I was just like in shock. I was just like, oh my God, he's fine. Oh my God. Like it was something else. So now we've already touched on this, but we're at Engage Physically. It's been almost a given lately that the E section of the Chief system has been reserved for whatever ridiculous defensive performance this team was displaying.
Sure.
That's usually been the spot here. But you know, we've talked about it. Not so on this night. It was a weird game for the defense. The Bucs didn't have their top 2 wideouts, but Cade Otton looked like freaking prime Gronk out there, and the Bucs just were. They were moving pretty well. They hadn't turned the ball over. They hadn't done anything dumb on offense. The worst thing they did was punt, and they were moving basically most of the night. So we'll have to go to the other old reliable E Engage Physically candidate, and the last couple weeks that's been Kareem Hunt, as he talked about. Dude's just a warrior, and he had 27 carries in this game for 106 yards and a touchdown, and just proves time and time again that when you need the tough yards, he is the guy to call on. All the other yards are fine. The Chiefs can get yards any number of ways. They can get him in the short passing game. They can get him running the ball with other guys, with P. Ryan or with Steele or whatever. But if there's an important yard or two, there's no one else I would rather have. And, you know, I kind of consider him to be a type of player that we thought Carson Steele's absolute ceiling would be, which is not a slight to Carson Steele at all. That's just saying that, run hard, run smart, protect the ball, run dirty. Though it's kind of a fullback mentality. And even though Kareem might take some exception to being described as a fullback these days, actually, I don't think he would, because he is just a do whatever he can for the team, runs like a player driven by motivation, which is not always the case in the NFL. Like, he looks like he's a guy that's out there to prove something. And these guys are all good, but not all of them have that extra gear. And it's just hard not to appreciate what he brings to the team, as you said earlier, from a physicality perspective. I do think, you mentioned that I don't know if the team's going to be better if he pulls back on his workload. I think he's going to have to pull back on his workload physically.
Yeah, that's
like,
true.
I think if the Chiefs want a Super Bowl run of 3rd and 2 to go to Kareem Hunt, they can't be giving him 29 carries a game. They just can't do it.
Yeah,
and
they got to keep him fresh.
And his 29 carries are like a hard 29 carries.
Yeah,
they're
sure.
He gets it as much as he gives it. And so I just appreciate him. I think he's a perfect candidate for engaged physically. I know you already waxed poetic about Kareem a lot, but what an ad by Brett Veach here.
Yeah, and I will add one thing about Kareem Hunt that I really appreciate about him. It's not directly related to engaged physically, but you know what I feel every time Kareem Hunt touches the ball is I feel safe. I feel like I'm being wrapped in a blanket of perfect safety and comfort. I'm not like a weighted blanket guy, but I feel like it's just like weighting me down and soothing me to sleep. And you know why that is? It's because Kareem Hunt, in 1,141 career carries, has only fumbled the ball 5 times. And one of those, very famously, was on his first NFL touch in his first NFL game against the New England Patriots, which ended up
defending champs,
prolific game of his career statistically, still to this day.
Right.
4 times in 1,140 carries since then. And if you add in, he's had another 233 receptions. So we're talking about 1,374 career touches.
There you go.
He's fumbled the ball 5 times. And 4 times since his first NFL touch. Just to give you some perspective on that, Isaiah Pacheco has 473 career touches. He has also fumbled the ball 5 times. So we've got, he's
like a 4-to-1 rate.
Quarter of the touches and the same number of fumbles. I just he's so good at protecting the ball. And you would think, guys that run like Kareem and Pacheco do, the guys that are really physical, that are seeking out contact, those are the guys that usually have more of a fumbling problem, because they're the ones that are getting bashed and bloodied. They're moving the pile. There's 4 guys in there that could punch the ball out or yank it out. And it just is amazing to me how secure Kareem has been with the ball. I don't want to jinx it or anything like that, but man, I just feel safe when the ball is in his hands, which is an important thing to feel.
It is. The safety is a lot like the safety I feel now throwing to DeAndre Hopkins, where it's like, it's just going to work. Like, it's just it's such a great feeling. So now we're on F, we're on finish strong. And after the Mahomes injury scare, he comes back in the game. It's 17-17, a minute into the 4th quarter. While he's in the tent, the Bucs immediately just go 3 and out and put the pressure right back on the Chiefs to see what they were going to do about the quarterback situation. But no Carson Wentz in this one. Pat comes back out, leads the team on the longest drive of the game yet, which is really saying something considering what I just talked about on those other double-digit drives. But this is a 15-play, 78-yard, 8-minute and 26-second drive. Now, they are the only team in the league with 2 such drives of those lengths in all 3 categories this year on the season. And there's only 5 other teams that even have 1 of those types of drives. So 15 or more plays, 78 or more yards, and 26 or more. So they are just dominant in their opposing of their will and being able to just string together play after play after play on a drive. Their floor is unbelievably high. Their floor is probably the best aspect of the offense by far. They just wear you down. And so Pat's back. They convert 3 third downs on out of the 4 on this drive. And the one time that they don't convert a third down, it was a 3rd and 2. They get a yard. And so on 4th and 1, they hand it off to Kareem Hunt for an important 1 yard. And like I said earlier, you need an important yard. He's the guy to go to. He picks it up. They get down to the goal line, 3rd and goal from the 5. Pat finds our new favorite football player that's ever lived after Patrick Mahomes, which is, of course, DeAndre Hopkins for his 2nd touchdown of the game. Pat's 3rd passing touchdown of the game, the first time he's had a 3-touchdown game in his last 20 games, which just there have been 92 times where a quarterback's thrown 3 touchdowns between those 2 games, which is just insane. And he obviously there have been circumstances and some stuff with the cast, but in general, this team's gotten down in the red zone lately, and they've wanted to hand the ball off. It's been safer, and Kareem scored a bunch of touchdowns, and they've kind of been doing some other stuff. But they got down there and had 2 goal line touchdowns to Hopkins, 3 for the game with the P. Ryan one. So 24-17 Chiefs. They are finishing strong. There's a couple minutes left. All they have to do is hold Tampa Bay off.
I mean, we have to talk about DeAndre Hopkins again because, like,
me too.
I can't get over just how different he is from every other receiver the Chiefs have had in the Patrick Mahomes era. He's another guy that, like you said, he's the receiver version of Kareem, where, like, if the ball is in his catch radius, anywhere within his considerable catch radius, I already have total confidence after 2 games, really 1.5 games, that he's going to catch the ball. And that is such a huge asset in the red zone where spaces are condensed. And I mean, we've seen, gosh, I don't know how many picks over the last 2 years have been tipped balls in the red zone because, guys can't come up with the ball, but it's at least 3 or 4 off the top of my head. And, I mean, there was at least one this year, and I can think
Juju.
I can think of at least 2 last year.
Sure,
that's not going to happen when you're throwing DeAndre Hopkins the ball. It's crazy how quickly Mahomes has developed trust with him and knows that he can just funnel that guy the ball and he will catch it, right? Like, it's remarkable. And it's crazy that it's been 20 games since Patrick Mahomes had 3 passing touchdowns in this game.
Yeah.
He obviously could have had 4 if Worthy had been a little bit more aware about where the sideline was. But to me, the fact that he was able to get the ball all over the field at all levels of the defense was really impressive. He took some deep shots. The one to Worthy should have worked. He took one to Justin Watson that he couldn't haul in. He obviously, heaved the ball up to DeAndre Hopkins and he came down with that. It felt like, anecdotally, and I have not been able to look this up, but it felt like, he's back to taking advantage of teams down the field, which is something that we haven't seen since Tyreek got traded away. And it was amazing to see. It was so fun.
I think this is the version that they installed when they planned on Rashee Rice and Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy being the offense. And I think they had plays in place for that just haven't been able to run this year. And then you get Hopkins in there. He commands so much attention, which he should. He's a Hall of Famer. And, now you have Kelsey and Worthy and Hopkins on the same field. And I mean, defenses are in trouble. We've seen it. It's not a pretty situation for a defense to have to get all that stuff figured out. And, I mean, Worthy didn't have a catch in this game, but he does stretch the defense. He does have a gravity to him that you can tell when he runs, they make sure they've got somebody over the top. They make sure they're accounting for him because they know that eventually that's going to work for the Chiefs and he's going to get behind you and it's going to be a bad situation. So yes, it was a lot of fun to see the version of Pat that we all knew has been hiding in there deep down and just waiting for the right opportunity to come back. And 291 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's going a long way towards, if Pat's back, everyone's back. I mean,
Right.
we're back. You and I are back. Like the whole thing. So we'll talk about now S separate entirely. Yeah. The Bucs marched down the field in the last 2 minutes and score a touchdown, whatever. But I already told you guys it wasn't a defense's night.
No.
It was also not Todd Bowles' night. As the Bucs were down 7, they scored the touchdown on the road against the two-time defending champs with 27 seconds left in the fourth quarter. First, they get down to the 1, and he calls a timeout. With 33 seconds to go at the 1-yard line with a ticking clock, he definitely should have let more time cook off that clock. I don't know if it's 10 seconds more or 15 seconds more or what the magic number is there, but calling it with 33 seconds and then scoring on your very next play just left the Chiefs too much time. And
Yeah.
we were all thinking it. We were all thinking when they scored the touchdown, I texted you, they're definitely going to go for 2 here. 100%. I mean, everyone on Twitter was saying, well, can't wait to see the Bucs try and win or lose the game here with one play. That's where we all were thinking. But many people have pointed out since then, 27 seconds, 3 timeouts, down 1. Plenty of time for Mahomes to at least get within Butker's absolutely prodigious range. I know it was in the rain, but like you're telling me that if there was a long field goal for the chance to win the game, if Butker misses that, that'd be the first time he's ever missed a big kick. So the Chiefs probably just would have won the game at that point. I did some research on teams that have gone for 2 or kicked the extra point, like had the same decision that Todd Bowles had to make when on the road, scoring a touchdown in the last minute of the fourth quarter. It actually has not gone very well for those teams. The trailing team went for the 2-pointer to win in 16 of the 33 instances since 2013. So just a tick under half of the time they went for the win right there. They converted 7 of those 16 attempts. You expect 50%, so just a tick under it again, but basically what the conversion rate you would expect there. One of those 7 successful games was 40 seconds left, and they lost the game anyway on a field goal without even going to overtime. So they have a 6-10 record in those 16 times where they have gone for 2 and the win. When they kicked the tying extra point, as Todd Bowles did, they went 6-11 in the overtime period. And actually, this was before the game last night, or the game on Monday. So 6-12, you win about a third of the time when you kick the extra point.
Right.
You're on the road. Overall a 12-21 or 12-22 record in those cases. I would have thought it would have been closer to 500, but Tampa decided to kick it. They sent it to a coin toss. Patrick Mahomes is 8-2 in his career in overtime. 6-0 in the regular season after this one was over. You know the script. The drive in overtime, 10 plays, 70 yards, 5 minutes, 52 seconds, a third down rushing attempt by Kareem Hunt. Wraps it up 30-24. Chiefs win by separating entirely from the Bucs in overtime.
Yeah, I mean, incredible. I don't have much to add except that I didn't want to go public with this take because I can't tweet a normal tweet during the game because the reverse jinx thing, and people will get mad at me if I do something and
it's not the right time for normal
work
tweets.
out. Yeah, it's not. I'm not allowed to do normal tweets anymore during the game, which is kind of annoying, but
Not
it's
allowed.
fine. I do it for you guys, and because of your harassment and your love for the New Kids on the Block movie. But I was convinced that Todd Bowles was not going to go for 2. That's just not the kind of coach that he is. If it was, obviously we saw it in week 1, Harbaugh was ready to do it. He had a play called, and then the official stepped in and said, foot's out of bounds. It's not a touchdown, and the game was over.
Handed the game to the Chiefs. Thanks,
I figured that Bowles would not be aggressive enough to go for 2 against the Chiefs, and I'm not sure that it would have mattered if he did. I forget who was making this point, but one of the one of the major network shows, they kind of pointed out that, if you go for the 2 and you get it in that situation, then you've given the Chiefs full. I mean, they have to go for the field goal and the win in regulation, right? You cannot with a 1-point deficit, you can't send it to overtime. So you're going to go for it on 4th down if you have to, you
induce aggression out of the
seconds.
Chiefs.
Exactly. And how often has that ever worked out for anyone that has ever induced aggression in the Kansas City Chiefs ever? It's never worked out. It will only result in your swift death. So they did prolong the game a little bit longer, but the result was inevitable. You saw it when Baker, saw that he lost the coin toss. He had a chance to call it. He called it wrong. And you knew the second that the ref said what it was, Baker kind of full on hung his head. And he knew it was going to happen. We all knew it was going to happen. The Chiefs were going to separate entirely, and they did. Let's talk awards. Now, we have 3 types of awards. Of course, we have our 5-Star Man Award, who, through their play on the field, are shouting out, "I'm a 5-star man." We've got our Trash Men.
I'm the trash man. I come out, I throw trash all over the ring, and then I start eating garbage.
Who are eating garbage all over the field. Pretty self-explanatory. And we have wild cards.
Wild card, bitches! Yeah!
Who are, of course, capable of anything. I will kick this off with DeAndre Hopkins as my 5-star man. 8 catches, 86 yards, 2 touchdowns, including, we already talked about it, one of the most unique highlights of the Patrick Mahomes era in Kansas City. Just unreal. I mean, every angle of it, every, slowed up, sped down, you're putting some hype music behind it. I'm into it. All of it. I'm going to press retweet. They are all amazing. This was his highest yardage total since week 13 of last year. His first multi-touchdown game since week 7 of last year. And I mean, if you look at his route map on Next Gen Stats, it looks completely different than his last couple of games in Tennessee. And, he had a full year in Tennessee to learn the playbook. Now, they did change coaches this year, but still,
sure. He's got Will Levis throwing.
Yeah, exactly. He was in camp. He knew that offense backwards and forwards. And yet, they had him lined up pretty much solely on the left side of the defense and running these really short, intermediate routes. The Chiefs moved him all around the formation and all over the field. I mean, he ran from every different receiver position from left to right on the offensive side of the field. He's running deep, he's running short, and he's catching everything that gets thrown his way. That is a 5-star man.
Love him so much. Has been the apple of my eye for the Chiefs to acquire for several years before they eventually got him this year. Just a fun piece, reliable target. Can't say enough about what he did to this offense's ceiling and ability moving forward without Hollywood and Rasheed to continue to put up points and play meaningful NFL football. Just a lot of fun. So good pick there. I'm going to go with the guy throwing him the ball. I know there was plenty of good 5-star performances to go around in this game. Chiefs were pretty good, but Pat showed us everything. Showed us his whole, the whole package. 291 yards, 3 passing touchdowns. Threw it short, medium, and long from the pocket, on the run, improvised with the 1-2 where he got hurt to P. Ryan. Showed those Gumby-like joints of his when he got hurt. That absolutely crazy ability of his to bounce back from injury. His first 3 touchdown passing game in over a year, like I said, which sounds impossible. And shout out to Pat for throwing his first career touchdown pass in the 4th quarter of a tie game. That's right. I did double check that. They mentioned that stat. I did. Huh. They mentioned it on the broadcast, and I looked at every one of his touchdowns. Now, he does have 23 touchdown passes in his career when down by 7 or less in the 4th quarter or overtime, including 3 overtime touchdown passes. So it's not like he's never thrown a big touchdown or whatever. But
he's not like Joe Burrow, who's actually never thrown a touchdown in the 4th quarter of a playoff
Correct.
game. Ever.
But when the score is exactly tied and in exactly the 4th quarter, that was his first one. And let's hope it's not his last.
Let's hope not. I don't think it will be. Why don't you give me your trash man?
It brings me no joy, as it usually does, to name any Chiefs as trash men, but we've talked about it a lot. We got to go with Xavier Worthy here. 2 targets, no catches. The one should have been an easy touchdown if he stays in bounds. And then the other one was a sideline catch that he couldn't come down with or stay in bounds. And those were his 2 targets. And 2 carries for 10 yards. One was a 0-yard carry where he got stuffed, and the other one was the worst play of his
yards.
Yeah, exactly. 2 carries for minus 10 yards. Yes. 1 for 0, which was his best carry, and 1 for -10. Horrible play on an end around. His 4.2 speed was not on display at all. Some people did blame other factors on the play, the blocking or whatever, but the point is the kid's struggling. He'll figure it out, but he was a trash man today. Look, if McCole Hardman had those two plays, which we've seen so very similar plays on McCole, I mean, we'd be talking about what is he even doing on this team? We got to get him cut. We got to get him out of here. If Kadarius Toney had those two plays, he might literally have been cut after the game if that was his contribution to the game. I mean, it was rough. The fact that he's a rookie, the fact that he's still learning the offense, and that let's face it, he's been thrust into a larger role than what the Chiefs had planned for him at this point in the year with the injuries. I give him a break as far as the big picture stuff. I totally get that it's been a tough situation and that he will get better, but you can't do what he did in that game and get away with not being a trash man on our show. So he's a trash man.
Yeah. I'm going to go with a guy that if he's been a trash man before, I don't remember it. Maybe that game where he let Dan Sorensen play in single coverage against Jamar Chase the entire game. We got roasted for like 370 yards and 8 touchdowns.
Jesus.
Steve Spagnuolo is my trash man in this game. It brings me no joy. Obviously, he's been incredible and a huge part of the Chiefs' 3 Super Bowl victories since he came on to run the defense. This is the first game in a long time where I felt like Spags kind of got worked. I mean, like,
yeah,
the Bucs were missing their top receivers and still absolutely diced the Chiefs up for most of this game. Liam Cohen, the Bucs offensive coordinator, is going to be a head coach somewhere in 2025. I would basically guarantee it with the work that he's been doing when they still had Godwin and Evans.
Sure.
And Evan.
Yeah.
When he still had Godwin and Evans, I mean, incredible work. But then to come into Kansas City against this defense and put together the kind of game plan that he did, that guy's going to be a head coach somewhere in 2025. I just hope that it's not in the AFC because he is legit. Let me hit you with my wild card and I'll let you close this out. I'm going to take Joshua Uche. He only played 9 snaps in this game. To be expected, obviously, he's only been with the team for about a week, but he did chase Baker down after getting behind the line of scrimmage, won his rep, and then Baker is scrambling. Joshua Uche comes in and is able to clean up that scramble for a short gain. It ended up getting called back anyway because there was holding on the play. But again, like, I mean, if you're forcing holding calls or, forcing the refs to pay attention to that, that's valuable too. I mean, this is kind of the play that we thought we might get from him. And we did get, this was a positive contribution in his first game as a Chief, but hopefully also a sign of things to come. I mean, we talked about it. A guy that can get around the edges, great. A guy that can win with speed around the edge is great. But even if you're not winning that rep one-on-one and getting to the quarterback, it still is valuable to have a guy on your pass rushing unit who has the speed to chase somebody down.
Yes.
If you get Chris Jones or Deshaun Wharton, or when he comes back, Charles Omenihu through the line, those guys are great and they can be very disruptive. But if the quarterback is, let's say a Josh Allen or somebody, or like a Kyler Murray, somebody that has a lot of mobility, they still have a chance to escape that. With Joshua Uche out there, kind of getting around the edge and then essentially just, cleaning up some of these plays, you can't do that anymore. So he was a really interesting, intriguing addition to the team. Can't wait to see what his role is going to be like going forward. Close this out.
Not a bad edge group now with Karlaftis and Dana and Omenihu and Uche and Felix. I mean, those are some guys, man. It's that's Spags. He sure knows what's up. I will give us a wild card performance out of Travis Kelce. Career high 14 receptions, but a drop and a very costly fumble with 1:03 left in the first half. The Chiefs are at midfield, chance to tack on a 3 or a 7 at that point, obviously. His 14 receptions are the most in NFL history for any player age 35 or older. Now, Ben Solak tweeted out he couldn't find a game of a tight end at 35 or older with more than 14 catches, and I quote tweeted him and said that's because no player in NFL history 35 or older had 14. And then he just tweeted, "Oh, I have a correction to this tweet. No player in NFL
I didn't even know
history."
that. I saw his correction.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
I know.
Because you
his correction was posted on New Heights and all kinds of everyone went with it. Sports Center.
I didn't even know that was your doing.
I got him in the right direction there. I sure toot my own horn there. So, yes, that does include Jerry Rice, who last caught 14 balls at the young age of 33. So Travis, 35-year-old man, 14 catches for 100 yards, truly capable of anything at this point in his career, and wild card.
I love it. And that's going to close the book on the Chiefs' Week 9 victory over the Buccaneers. Let's turn to Week 10. Chiefs are hosting the Denver Broncos. Now, we don't have to spend a ton of time on this game because, let's face it, any time that we spend talking about the Broncos, especially in a preview capacity, I'm sure next week's episode where we're recapping hopefully a victory, that will be quite lengthy. But we don't need to give them more credit than they have earned, and we don't need to dignify this preview with a detailed exposition of this matchup. But there are a few things that I want to get into here. After beating the Broncos 16 times in a row, this is the first time the Chiefs enter a matchup with the Denver Broncos, having lost the previous game since September 17th, 2015. All right, 9 years ago, more than 9 years ago. This is the first time that the Chiefs have gone into this game having lost the previous game in 9 years. We all remember how the last matchup went. Mahomes had the flu. The Chiefs turned the ball over 5 times in this game, and the Broncos won 24-9. It was really not competitive. But this is an exciting opportunity because, number one, Chiefs still won the Super Bowl last year. So, whatever. At the end of the day, while the streak was extremely cool and we had a great time with it here on the show, it's just a streak. It's just a number against a specific division rival. I'm excited about this because this is the first time that Patrick Mahomes can get revenge on the Broncos. He couldn't get revenge on them before because they'd never done anything to him, right? Like he didn't, they had to wake him up, and they have done that now with their overwhelming defeat of Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs last year. Can't wait to see how this plays out.
Can you imagine how long our death list would have been? It'd be a year longer if they had not had that happen. So I'm pissed at the Broncos for ruining the streak and for ruining one of our funnier internal bits that we had. But they don't know what they've done by pissing Mahomes off. He's 32-5 against the division in his career. And these games, I mean, Andy Reid, first of all, Patrick Mahomes aside, Andy Reid lives for division games. Like that is what gets him out of bed in the morning. And, the Broncos at home, like this is why you set up a juggernaut team, is to clown your closest rivals. Like this is what it's all about. These are the opportunities that the Chiefs have to really just kind of give everyone in the kingdom a good time. And I can't wait to see it.
Now it is Wednesday, and it is still a little bit early, relatively speaking, in the Week 10 slate. But I really thought that local Broncos sports radio would be a little bit more into this, and I guess it's pretty hard to be rah-rah, we're going to kick Kansas City's ass when you just lost by 31 points the week before this. But I mean, what's crazy to me about this is I was downtown. I have about an hour commute. And so I listened to, sports talk this afternoon on my way back just to see if I could find any funny bits for the show. And it was actually very respectful, like annoyingly respectful, no sound bites from the players. They're talking about how good our players are. Ugh. Like we know our players are good. Like
we've cucked them.
Yeah, exactly. We don't need you to tell us that. Mm-hmm. And I wish that they showed a little bit more fire in their belly in the local sports scene, because, I mean, let's face it, normally we have the exact opposite problem with Broncos fans, which is that they're delusional and delusionally hopeful. And it's great to be able to go in and kind of pop their bubble. I really think that this Baltimore loss has resonated deeply with the Denver Broncos fan base in a way that has made them less fun for me personally to interact with them, which is disappointing.
Yeah, you would have liked to have been the team to pop that bubble, right?
Yeah, like, absolutely.
It definitely would have enjoyed a 41-10 win when they thought they had a chance to win. And it might be another 41-10 win. We'll see how it goes. But yes, I do. I feel bad for you that you can't clip them and pull your receipts in a week and all that fun stuff. But we'll have to take with them just being beaten down and dejected instead.
Yeah, that sounds great. And when the Chiefs have the ball, they'll have the opportunity to do just that. You talked about it, just the plodding but methodical, incredibly deadly nature of the Chiefs offense this year. I mean, the drive stats that you pulled up in the Chiefs systems kind of say it all. I mean, this is a team that can sustain long drives and finish them with touchdowns better than any team in the league currently. The Chiefs are currently ninth in offensive DVOA, but I feel like that really, and this is the part of the year where DVOA sort of starts to take more information into account, whether it be preseason projections of what a
Right.
team is supposed to do, whether it be, obviously, just the strength of schedule, the opponent quality adjustments are kind of getting baked into DVOA at this point. It feels like an offensive explosion is coming. They did get to 30 points last week for the first time in a very long time, and it took them overtime to get there. But, if Worthy pulls that touchdown in, they get to 30 points in regulation and everything is fine. The Broncos, on the flip side here, seventh in defensive DVOA, after getting shellacked, even after getting shellacked by the Ravens last week. But you alluded to this. On Monday, they traded away Baron Browning to the Cardinals for a 6th-round pick. And I can remember hearing Baron Browning compared on local sports talk radio to Von Miller, which is obviously insane.
Sure.
But obviously, insane is a huge understatement. Honestly, it's outrageous. But the guy did have 9.5 sacks in 43 career games, and he's a former 3rd-round pick. And I don't know. I feel like if this team, the Broncos, was serious about contending this year, this is a kind of guy that I probably would have kept.
Definitely. They don't know if they're contenders. They really don't. And that's what I was saying earlier. They have some pieces and some interesting kind of things, and yeah, their defense has performed well against the bottom feeders, but they just don't have the guarantee that they should go all in or anything close to that. So they kind of hedged, and they're 5-3, and maybe they can sneak in as a 6 or a 7, but they knew that they could get a pick for Baron Browning, and they just decided to kind of do neither. They're not really rebuilding. They're not really going for it. They're just floating. They're doing what the mid 2000s Chiefs we would accuse them of just
100%.
being 500. And like, no one in the NFL wants to be 500 ever. Like, you want to be good or bad. That's the way to be good, is you have to be bad first, or you just are good the whole time, like the Chiefs. But you can't just middle of the road it. And these Broncos look like they're set up to be middle of the road for a while. Like they have kind of a high enough ceiling because they have a defense and they have like an experienced coach and whatever. And like, they're probably not going to go 2-15 for a while, although that would be pretty funny. But yes, it's funny to see them trade away a guy like Baron Browning, because it just signals to their fans that, like, I don't know, guys, we don't know. So it's funny.
Yeah, and the fans are pissed because, of course, again, this is one of the most delusional fan bases in sports, and they really did think that they were contenders. Now, the Ravens disabused them of that notion to some extent, and I was shocked today. Now, part of this is because they know that when you get shellacked by the Ravens and you're playing the Chiefs the following week, they honestly just didn't talk about the Broncos that much. It's Nuggets season now. It's Av season now. Like, we're just gonna pepper in some non-football coverage to not have to acknowledge the fact that the Broncos were embarrassed on Sunday and probably will be embarrassed on Sunday again. But one other thing I'm looking at in this game is the potential matchup between Pat Surtain and DeAndre Hopkins. The Broncos like to move Surtain around, and he will shadow guys. And, I don't think he's the best cornerback in the NFL, but a lot of people do. And if I feel like, this is sort of weird to say because DeAndre Hopkins is a Hall of Famer. He's probably going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But I just feel like after what happened on Monday and seeing him turn back the clock the way he did, I'm getting a little bit greedy. Like, I want to see how far he can turn back the clock.
How far he can go.
Yeah, I want to see how far he can go. And this potential matchup with Pat Surtain, that's like a great measuring stick to sort of find out what you have in DeAndre Hopkins. And call me crazy, but like, I'm kind of excited to see him torch Pat Surtain. Listen, I understand he's a very good cornerback. He's great. I have seen old wide receiver Devontae Adams absolutely clown Pat Surtain in multiple matchups over the last couple of years. So I'm not saying DeAndre Hopkins is Devontae Adams. They have a little bit different play style. I'm not saying that, Hopkins is going to go off, but I'm just terribly curious to see how this matchup plays out. And I'm feeling kind of optimistic about how it's going to work out for our Chiefs.
Buddy, bust out the straitjackets, because if you're crazy, we're all crazy. I think that, one element to a wide receiver being able to burn a good cornerback in general is that you've also got to pair the wide receiver with a quarterback.
Right.
Like,
sure.
It's one thing for, a Pat Surtain to shut down a really good wide receiver that maybe doesn't have a guy like Mahomes throwing to him. But Mahomes is not going to shy away from DeAndre Hopkins because Pat Surtain is covering him. He's not going to be scared to put the ball exactly where he needs to put it and to challenge him and to do all the things that we know Patrick will do. And, I think that the Broncos probably rely pretty heavily. I don't know this schematically, but I would think just kind of vibes wise that they rely pretty heavily on Pat Surtain being able to hold his own against most NFL wide receivers.
I mean, they got a white guy playing cornerback on the other side,
which is all you need to know. And I think that they'll probably be in for a rude awakening if they realize that, oh shit, we can't just double everyone else and have Pat Surtain go one-on-one on an island with this guy because he's going to get cooked. And then now what do? Now we pull our double off of Travis Kelce to go cover DeAndre Hopkins, and now Travis Kelce's going to cook us. And now next thing you know, Xavier Worthy's going over the top, and the Chiefs are cooking. And so I do think that there's a potential here for things to snowball for the Broncos, for them to not have played a team like the Chiefs yet, and for the Chiefs to take advantage of it.
Let's hope so. On the other side of the ball, when the Broncos have the ball on offense, they will be facing off against the number 4 defensive DVOA, obviously in Kansas City. Detroit, Houston, and Minnesota still ranked ahead of the Chiefs in defensive DVOA, but for my money, I mean, my eyes tell me that the Chiefs have the best defense in the NFL. They now have the second longest streak in NFL history in allowing 28 or fewer points in a game. They're, I think, 4 games behind Andy Reid's 2002 to 2003 Philadelphia Eagles for that streak, on which Steve Spagnuolo was a defensive assistant. So, I mean, they have to play the Bills next week. That'll be a test. But this number 24 ranked in offensive DVOA Broncos team doesn't feel like it's going to be much of a challenge for this defense. They're starting a rookie quarterback, obviously, in Bo Nix, granted an extremely old rookie quarterback who played literally 8 million games in college. But he's never seen a defense like Steve Spagnuolo's defense. He's never played in a place like Arrowhead. I don't care. Come at me, college football fans.
No.
It's cool. Your stadiums are cool. All I know is they've tried to break the noise record at Death Valley multiple times, and they haven't come close to shattering the noise record that the Chiefs set against the Raiders. I'm excited to see what Spags has in store for Bo Nix.
Look, it's one thing to be a rookie quarterback and have all that potential in front of you and all that youth and all that stuff. But being an old rookie quarterback is the worst of both worlds. He doesn't have the youthful athleticism. I mean, I know obviously he's 24, but it would just be a lot different for me thinking about Bo Nix's future with the Broncos if he was 21 and he was doing the exact same stuff he was doing now, but he was 3 years younger.
Yeah.
I would be kind of right now. I just feel like it's just I don't know. We'll see kind of how he develops, but you're absolutely right. He hasn't played anywhere close to this environment. The other thing about college versus Arrowhead is it just doesn't mean as much in college. And I know college football fans would disagree, but there are so many more implications to winning and losing an NFL football game than there are a college football game. There are fewer teams, there's more money, there's more at stake, there's more everything. It's the pros. It's the biggest version of football. And so even if maybe he's played in crowds as big as Arrowhead before, it didn't mean this. It wasn't Arrowhead. It wasn't Chiefs Broncos. So yes, I do think that he's got some growing up to do on Sunday, and I think the Chiefs are going to be able to help him along that path.
I just was reminded for some reason when you were talking of an absurd sports take that I did hear on Denver sports radio today.
Great.
It has nothing to do with the NFL, but they were talking a lot about CU and CU's potential playoff chances. And one of the hosts suggested that the college football playoff could become bigger than March Madness, which obviously is absurd on its face. Okay. Like, but also like it will never be as good as March Madness because guess what? The 15 seed in a college football playoffs is going to lose 100-0, right? It's not going to be upsetting
Well,
a 2
could
seed.
never play 6 playoff games. They don't have the schedule for it.
Anyway,
they don't have you're right. I do think
these are the kind of
college
people that are
football,
providing takes
about
in the
Denver
local
Broncos.
sports market.
Yeah. I do think that college football has a lot of spectacle involved. I think that the expanded playoff, I know we're going off tangent, but I think the expanded playoff is a success. And I think that more teams that are involved in a college football playoff environment are better than fewer teams. But there is nothing in sports like March Madness. I'm not saying that it's the best version of whatever. I'm just saying spectacle-wise, it's just its own unique beast. And to compare any type of playoff environment to March Madness is a fool's errand. So, yeah. Dum-Dums in Denver, news at 11.
Speaking of fools in Denver, Sean Payton deserves some comeuppance. After running up the score on the worst team in the NFL 2 weeks ago, blowing out the Panthers, Sean told them that if they didn't like it, they should play better. Deeply ironic because, of course, then the very next week, he goes to Baltimore and the Ravens run up the score on him. And that was extremely satisfying to see. It was very satisfying to see the Broncos lose by 31 after smarmy Sean Payton is making snide comments about the poor, sad Carolina Panthers. But listen, while he has been humbled to some degree by the Ravens' performance, it feels like there is still plenty of crow that we could serve this guy this week. And listen, I'll remind you, Andy Reid does not like the Broncos. Now, this may have been a Josh McDaniels thing, which would be completely fair. But let's not forget that this Denver Broncos franchise is the same franchise that Andy Reid pulled out the hungry pig against, having, Dontari Poe throwing, running for, scoring touchdowns. And so I don't know what it is. I wonder if Big Red is going to have something special cooked up for this Broncos team.
He definitely is. It's like the Chiefs treat these 3 teams differently than the other opponents.
They do.
And they study harder for them. They play harder against them. There's just this element of like, look, we might not have it figured out every week against every team, but you better damn be sure that we're going to bring it against you guys. And you're right. Andy seems to relish in those divisional matchups. Not only with the record, but just with the way that he calls the games. The way he calls the games feels different. Yes. Yeah, the Snow Globe's another great example of that. And Sean Payton, very much a dislikable figure in the NFL right now. I think across the league, just from how things were handled with the Jets and Hackett and all that stuff, and just everything that Sean Payton's done since he got to Denver has not really sat well with anybody else. And if there's one thing I know about Andy Reid, is that everyone loves him, and he's the good guy. He's the good guy. I don't care if you don't think that out there that the Chiefs are the good guys or whatever. Andy Reid is most definitely the good guy. And so this is a perfect opportunity for him to just kind of cement that status and satisfy everyone around the league by kicking the hell out of Sean Payton.
For the good of all the land, the Chiefs shall dispatch the Broncos with great haste and tremendous power on Sunday. If all goes according to plan, let's hope that it does. We will be back next week. It's always sunny in Chiefs Kingdom.